Hopewell Plantation is among Clemson's historical treasures. Situated atop a hill that overlooks Lake Hartwell, the property has been called home by many. Shallow research would tell you that its historical significance rests on the Pickens family. The decades of negotiations General Andrew Pickens made with the Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Creeks were monumental in attempted peace treaties and short-term cohabitation with the Native Americans following the Revolution. In looking deeper into the history of this land, we can see how negligent historical curators and university archives have been in keeping the narratives of these indigenous people alive. The long history of white man's abuse of Native Americans in the Clemson area is symbolized in many aspects of our campus. Lake Hartwell itself engulfs land that used to be Cherokee villages, situated along what was formerly known as the Seneca River. The great homestead of the Hopewell Plantation looks out over this site, blind to the past and history it has quite literally flooded out. The dikes that students and locals and dogs alike use for jogs and sunset strolls were constructed for the flooding of Lake Hartwell in the 1950s. This building process dredged up, along with the mud, many Cherokee bodies from old burial sites near their villages. In visiting the plantation last week, we found no history of anything predating the construction of General Pickens' farmhouse atop the hill and maps of its original colonial architectural style. As if this were at all noteworthy in comparison to the tribes of indigenous peoples that resided there long before the state of South Carolina took the liberty of reallocating the land from beneath their feet to one of their nation's own formidable Revolutionary War heroes and U.S. representatives. While the Treaty of Hopewell is said to have improved peaceful relations, its existence would go on to be used against natives and ultimately lead to their complete elimination from this area. Upon research, one will find information on the treaty in a misleadingly positive light. In contrast, as put by Joanne Barker in her For Whom Sovereignty Matters, she reveals the reality that the Cherokees would go on to be screwed over by this treaty, when authorities such as U.S. Chief Justice John Marshall would use it as evidence of the Cherokees' consent to being governed by the United States. In Barker's words, Marshall turned to the Treaty of Hopewell to prove that the Cherokee acknowledged not only that they were under the protection of the United States of America and of no other power, but that they had benefited directly from said protections as evidenced by the subsequent treaties they signed with the United States. Such treaties would be turned to again and again by U.S. officials to validate times when the state would go back on their pledged sovereignty. For example, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830 into law, which authorized the president to grant unsettled lands west of the Mississippi in exchange for Indian territories within the existing state borders. A few tribes went peacefully, but many resisted the relocation policy, and during the fall and winter of 1838 and 1839, the Cherokees were forcibly moved west by the United States government. A brutal march that became known as the Trail of Tears, claiming the lives of about 4,000 Cherokees. The Cherokees is an untold story of Clemson's early history. The background of this area can date back as far as one wishes to investigate, and the mistreatment of our land's natives should not be overlooked.